prophecy? You think I pushed you down here and threw you in front of those dwarves because I heard a prophecy?
That's how it always is in the stories.
That's where prophecies belong, Kaylin. In stories and fairy tales. Prophecies and fate are words that are used by kings and queens to send young men and women to their death with smiles on their faces. Fate is fluid. Your destiny is in your own hands.
Of Blood and Fire, Book 1 of The Bound and the Broken by Ryan Cahill. This is a self-pub book and his debut novel. This book felt like what Eragon would have been if it had been written by John Gwynne. The plot follows a very similar storyline as Eragon. It's a classic story of boy with a dragon going up against the evil empire that has control of all the other dragon eggs. You'll see elves, dwarves, giants, and obviously dragons and dragon riders in this world. So if you are a fan of that classic type of fantasy novel, then this is right up your alley. Personally, I was a bit disappointed. I don't typically complain about books using common tropes, but at times this felt like it was using the same outline as Eragon, and as a result, it became very predictable. With that said, this does not read like Eragon. Like I mentioned at the beginning, the writing style is very similar to John Gwynne. This reads much more like adult epic fantasy than YA. And just one simple change is that the main characters are 18 in this book instead of 14 or something around there. So it's much more realistic when you have an 18-year-old beating grown men in sword fights as opposed to a 14-year-old. There will also be violent scenes and people being killed. Ryan has shown me no indications that he's afraid to kill off any characters. And I was also very relieved to see that there weren't any childhood romances of a preteen or early teenager falling in love with a 100-year-old elf. I really enjoyed the pacing of this book. He did a great job of mixing in plenty of action scenes throughout the book, so at no point was it dragging. Although it may have been predictable at times, it was never boring. The world building was also done well. You spend a good chunk of time in about 5 different places, and each of those places felt unique and was well developed. The magic system is a softish magic system. It's not my favorite, but it is explained well and there are some consequences to it. So I do like when magic systems have consequence, which this one does. It just doesn't quite have the same level of science that a Sanderson magic system would have. If you take the time to read The Fall, which is the prequel novella to Of Blood and Fire, you'll learn about the events that led to the world being the way it is in this book. And as a side note about The Fall, Ryan really flexes his action writing skills in that novella. So if you are an action junkie like I am, I highly recommend checking it out. At least give that a try, even if you're uncertain of whether or not you want to read Of Blood and Fire. I believe the ebook of The Fall is still available for free on his website, so I'll have a link to that in the description below. As far as characters, I can't say that I developed a really strong connection with any of them yet, but each character does feel like their own person with their own personality and own set of strengths and weaknesses and their own motives. Basically, each character was well developed and feels authentic. No one feels like they're just there to move the plot along. In addition, there are some very emotional character moments that will certainly pull at your heartstrings. I should also mention that beyond there being dragons in this world, there are also animal companions, which is always a plus. However, you don't get to see too much of him throughout this book. Overall, the only thing holding this book back from being 5 stars is how closely it imitates Eragon. If I had never read Eragon, then I have no doubt that this would have been a 5-star read for me. But because of that reason, it's only a 3.5 to a 4-star because I lost a lot of enjoyment feeling like I was reading Eragon for the second time. On my rating system out of 100, it scored a 74, which is a respectable score and puts it right above Age of Myth by Michael J. Sullivan. He did lay the foundation for the rest of the series to branch out and leave that Eragon comparison behind, so I am certainly looking forward to continuing with The Bound and the Broken. But since right now I'm just reviewing this single book and not the series as a whole, I can't overlook how similar this is to Eragon. Final thoughts? I did enjoy the audiobook, but I wouldn't say that the narrator really enhanced the experience like a Tim Gerard Reynolds usually does, but at the same time, he didn't subtract from the experience either. I know this is important to some people, so as far as road trip potential, if I was on a road trip with a kid, I probably wouldn't listen to this book. I think the violence might be a bit too graphic, but preteen, I don't think I'd have any issues. That wraps up my review. Let me know in the comments if you've read Of Blood and Fire and what you thought of it. And if you haven't read it yet, does this sound like something that you want to pick up? And until next time, bye.